I had to ask for that smooch. What the hell is the only chance I'm going to get here? You know, I'm about to violate the first rule of this. You're called upon to do something. This remarks that precede you always stimulate these ideas, and you get this temptation to go off on some tangent. But I just say that this is the one place I've done this for that I really feel like there's not much left to say after hearing Ellen's speech and Amy's. And you know what's interesting about that? When they got done, Ellen said, "Thank you, Amy." And as Amy walked back, she turned around and said, "Thank you, Ellen." I can tell you this, at the graduation of the University of Vermont today, the graduating senior will not refer to the president by the first name. I just think that's marvelous. And Ellen, the fact, I really don't have anything to say after this. And the audience is probably pleased. Good, we'll get out of here sooner. But when you... I didn't know it was that bad. I prepared, one of the Board of Trustees said 10 minutes max, 15 we drag you away kicking and screaming. So don't worry about it. But the fact that she could mention the staff and the faculty that are leaving and things that have done that can never happen at a big school. And that's the fundamental message I'll give you today, that small is beautiful. And the future is indeed in small and personal and humane and democratic. And progress doesn't mean getting bigger, it means getting smaller. And that's all I have to say. However, driving up here this morning, coming down from the northern part of the state where it's colder in the winter, of course, not as much snow. I was reminded of Daniel Webster's famous remark, a closing remark before the U.S. Supreme Court in 1818 when he argued the Dartmouth College case. He argued that case for an hour and 30 minutes without notes. Brilliant. And when he got done, he looked up at the justices and he said, "Sir," he said, "as I have said before, sir, and I repeat now, it is a small college, Dartmouth College, but there are those of us that love it." And that is now one of the great Daniel Webster quotes. And I was thinking about Marlboro. This is certainly a college that one could easily love. I'm going to ask you to trust me on one thing, and that is that I don't lie. Well, I might lie if I had to, but one of the worst things you can do in life, by the way, graduate, never tell a meaningless lie. If you got to lie, tell a good one. But don't get caught in small lies. It just doesn't work out. And you'll feel good. You don't have to worry about what you're saying all the time or where you've been. But I did not know the Robert Frost connection before I prepared for my talk here. That's the truth. And that, again, I've been preempted. All I hear about now this morning is Robert Frost, and I wanted to begin with one of his poems. I really loved the comment in one of your publications that on the formation of the college. The college's founder went to Robert Frost and he said, "Hey, Bob, I want to start a college." To me, that is success. When you can go to someone like Robert Frost and say, "Hey, Bob," that's amazing to me. The poem I'd like to start with is that, of course, led his book North of Boston. It's called The Pasture Spring. And in it he says, "I'm going up to view the pasture spring. I'll only stop to wash the leaves away and wait to watch the water clear. I may." And then that wonderful last line, "I shan't be gone long. You come too." And in that little poem, half of that poem, is my message today. And one thing is that he's not going to see a great mountain or a huge waterfall. He's going up to see a pasture spring. Work needs to be done. Smallness. The second thesis is democracy. You notice he's not going along. He wants somebody to come with him. And that's pure Aristotelian democracy, that human beings alone can never be human beings. We have to join collectives to establish our humanity. Then hermitry is insanity, in effect, and that leads to politics, which leads to democracy. I'm going to do something else I shouldn't, because I'm talking about town meeting, and you have in your audience a true Vermont hero. and I mean that in every sense of the word. Someone that any group of people that's talking about governing Vermont and preserving our democracy knows instantaneously. And a great pioneer in the technology of democracy, that's Robert Gannett Sr., who is here today. And I think we owe him some applause. He's from Marlboro, and he has his clothes on. His son is here too, and he's done all right. I'm going to talk about a couple of principles now. I should tell you at the beginning that this smallness comes from my own career, in a sense. This view of that small is beautiful. I noticed, by the way, in your catalog that you don't pay much attention to high school records or grades or SAT when you select people, but my goodness, you certainly have a talented bunch of students coming in. Very good indeed. In fact, what is it, 33% of your incoming students are in the top 10th of their graduating class. That's pretty darn good. It's top 10th. I must tell you, however, and I'm not bragging, that I not only was in the top 10th, I was in the top 10 of my students in my graduating class. In fact, I came in third. That's not hard to do when there's only 7 in the class. I stand before you too as a reject at the college that he applied to first. In fact, I'm the only tenured, named full professor at a major American university that was rejected at the school that he applied to. At that very school, I was rejected at the University of Vermont. And here I am, so there's hope. I should tell you that when I got my doctorate at the University of Connecticut, and God knows I'm going to get into trouble here, the University of Connecticut's a great school, but it's a big school and it's in Connecticut, and I wanted to get home, you can understand, and so I put the robe in the, whatever they hang over your, what's that called again? What they hang over the back? Yeah, thank you. And I put it, and I lost it. So whenever I go to a college thing like this at UVM or anywhere else, I don't have colors. So I went and bought some at the UVM store. I'm going to go home and throw them away, and I promise you this. If I ever appear again in this context, and I certainly will at UVM just as a professor, I shall wear the Marlboro colors. These really mean something. Not that I don't love UVM. Is this being recorded? I love UVM. But anyway, so I want to talk just briefly about democracy. Democracy, as you know, was feared by the founders, and so we replaced it with something called representative democracy. Representative democracy is an oxymoron. I'm sure you all know oxymorons are terms which by their own definition are contradictory. I love them. Jumbo shrimp, serious fun, working vacation, military intelligence. See, I know my audience, Peter. My wife's favorite is Microsoft Works. She's funnier than I am. I like wild game management. But as you all know, political science is probably the nation's great oxymoron. But real democracy, as practiced by the Greeks and is performed around the world now in many contexts that we don't know anything about it because they're all together now, too small, is democracy. Everything else is a substitute. And real democracy entails face-to-face decision-making. And that's about it. But that's huge. Democracy must be face-to-face in a small community, and it requires a decision. Lots of political scientists are writing about deliberation now. And they're talking about deliberation in Congress. Oh, there's an oxymoron, congressional deliberation. And as you know, all political scientists are liberal, and even they agree with that. But as a matter of fact, in the Vermont town meeting, decision does follow deliberation. And that's key. I once said something like, now I'm not sure about this audience, but it got by the censors on Vermont Public Radio, so it ought to be okay here. You think? I said there in one of my commentaries, I've got to get this right now because if it goes astray it could be really bad, that decision after deliberation in a democracy is like sex. Sex without completion is unsatisfying, and it tends to discourage participation. And if you can remember that when you think about democracy, I've earned my position here today. Now, you'll notice, Peter, that I'm taking off my watch so I can see it better. That should bring you home. My wife is saying now, please God, let him remember to bring it back to his chair. But democracies require community. The value of community democracy, face-to-face community decision-making in a town meeting format, and by the way, your student body here is almost the perfect size. I've investigated 1,435 town meetings, and optimal size of a town meeting is between 200 and 1,200. Any town under 2,500 can practice as well. You can get away with it up to a town of 5,000, but as Robert Gannett will tell you, after 5,000 you have to start thinking about other forms. But in a small community, democracy has two values. One is the inherent values it has for citizens. It requires some values that in the aggregate create civility. You know, Robert Putnam in his book Bowling Alone, which is now a classic in political science, ranks Vermont first among the 50 states on civility. There's a reason for that, you see. Town meeting face-to-face democracy inspires tolerance and forbearance. Eye-to-eye contact brings out the humanity in you, mainly because it creates empathy, which is the most important word in politics today, empathy. Walk a mile in someone else's shoes and see how you come out. This will make you listen to both sides of the story. We're all just human beings. Most of us are trying to get through the day as best we can. I learned that when my mother, who was one of 2 Democrats in a town of 1,500 Republicans, I learned about empathy. She made me carry a Stevenson sign in the 1956 election. I made a promise to God, get me back to the schoolyard in one piece, and I'll become a Republican. I did for a while, just to much to the consternation of one of the members of your board of trustees here, my friend Peter Mallory. And by the way, town meetings usually make, on average and over time, better decisions than representative democracies. There's no doubt about that. It's just that no one bothered to study them empirically before. But secondly, and which is very important to you students and this college, because you are a cosmopolitan college and you are cosmopolitan students, you come from everywhere, you're going to go everywhere, is, as de Tocqueville said, as Jefferson said, as Lewis Mumford, the 20th century leading urbanologist, even said, as John Dewey said, Vermont's philosopher. The real value of town meeting-like democracies is that they are, to extend the Robert Frost metaphor, they are like springs in the high hills of our democratic nation. And from these springs flow the waters of citizenship. And this nation is parched and thirsty for real citizens that don't get their politics from television. They get their politics from humane local interaction. These kinds of citizens can make judgments at the national level. This nation state, no continental mass nation state, can survive voting for people if they are not citizens first and voters second. As Benjamin Barber of Rutgers says, voting, just voting, is the thinnest and least qualitatively important act of politics, especially if you're not trained in the humane politics of civic interaction. Okay, finally, you got that so far, right? So you're with me so far. But all of you are thinking, well, how the hell can we produce the small communities that are the homeland of democracy? Because the prevailing paradigm in academia, and certainly in the media, is that history is linear. And everything is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and politics is going to become more and more and more central, where local people never make meaningful decisions, and therefore are altogether now unhappy, not satisfied, and they don't participate. But that paradigm into the future is unquestioned, except for a cadre of perhaps 10 or 15% of social scientists who I believe are on the right track. And that is that the prevailing technology of the 21st century, which is electronic technology, the computer age, the electronic highway, by the way, cliches are cliches usually because they're true. That phenomenon is decentralist in tone, and in fact, and empirically now, it is not centralist. Most writers still think today that computer technology is dehumanizing, and that it will continue to centralize politics and life. That's simply not the case. The most important invention of the 20th century was the automobile, wheel transportation. That created Los Angeles. Without it, there isn't any. Now, you graduating seniors are entering a world where we have another technology that will have as profound or more profound implications. And remember this, I know you've got cell phones, you've been told to turn them off. I can play video poker in my bedroom in Starksboro, Vermont in 3 in the morning with someone from Bangkok and Sydney in New Delhi, and for real money that changes hands instantaneously. I can build cars in Detroit with holographic television and robots from my little place in Starksboro, Vermont, from my bedroom. And the data show that more and more people are working where they live. That's the great promise of computer electronic technology. And remember this, right now it's embryonic. You are driving down the electronic highway in a Model A Ford. And when we had a Model A Ford on Charlie's farm where I grew up, and just for hauling hay, the person that built that, the first people drove that truck, imagined automobiles as they are today, could they? Where a little voice would come out and say, turn right, give me a break. You can't imagine the technology that the computers are going to give us next 100 years. I want you to try. And I think if you try, you see it leads to democracy. Not because we can vote apart from one another, but because we can live together in a place. So my recommendation to any graduate of a college today is to replace the organizing principle for human life of the urban industrial revolution, which was career. You've got to get a job. You that are my age, remember your parents saying, you got to get a job. Everything's about jobs. The Depression taught them that. Forgive them. By the way, for the parents here, I'm not advocating that go on and get it and all that. You know, the year spending here, I'm sure they'll get jobs. But in the urban industrial revolution, you centered your life around your job. And if someone said, you got to go to Phoenix and run that plant out there for us, you said, well, I'm off. Jobs, what? Paramount. Now, some scholars, some sociologists, some psychologists are arguing, and I agree with it, that we need to replace the concept of career with the concept of place when it comes to organizing one's life. That you stay in one place, no matter where it is. If it's a big city, decentralize the city. If that isn't small enough, decentralize the decentralization and create a neighborhood council, empower it. But whatever it takes, stay put. As the poet Wendell Berry says, there's no way you can really protect the environment unless you work with the environment on a daily basis. You forget about it, and I know students here understand that. So my message to you is replace the concept of career. Make your career fit your place. And the technology of the next century will help you do that in ways that you simply can't imagine. And as I began with a poet and end with a poet, Sir Walter Scott, his wonderful poem, The Last Row, he writes, "Breathes there a man with soul so dead that never to himself hath said, 'This is my own, my native land,' whose heart within him ne'er has burned, when home his footsteps he hath turned. Your happiness depends upon your place, not your careers. Go forth, as Amy said, and be responsible to politics and government, but start that responsibility among your neighbors first." Thank you.